Hey, welcome back to the eDrum Workshop. I'm Luke, and today we're going to look at the Lemon LE-HHC14, a 2-zone 14-inch electronic hi-hat pad and controller. I previously reviewed the HHC12, and at the time I thought, but I genuinely think they'd have absolutely cleaned up if they just came straight out with a 14-inch version. The good news is that the 14 is pretty much just a scaled up version of the 12, but there are a couple of quality of life upgrades to the accessories since that review video. So I'll cover those as well as recap all of the playability, compatibility and pros and cons as a refresher or in case you've not seen that review. This hi-hat is available direct from the manufacturer in China via Alibaba, and it's currently priced at $155 there. At the time of recording, this converts to around €144 or £120 in the UK. And this is only $26 more than the 12-inch model, which is pretty good for the extra surface size. When purchasing from overseas, you might also have to factor in high shipping costs, and there's always the chance of customs or import fees depending on the country that you're in and the total price of your order. There are some sellers online like Lemon Cymbals UK or Vibe Drums in Europe that you can purchase from, and with that you'll get shipping and a warranty from your country if that's what you prefer, though you might end up paying a little bit more that way. Typically though, it still works out much cheaper than the majority of two-piece hi-hats that you'll find from major manufacturers. And that is the biggest appeal of Lemon's brand in general, in my opinion. Now, as usual, I like to be transparent about where I get review products, and this one I bought myself. But however I source my review items, I'm able to remain fully independent because I'm supported by my store over at the eDrumWorkshop.com. If you're looking for the fastest way to upgrade the sounds of your electronic drums, I have kit presets, multi-layered instruments, and sample packs available for a wide range of modules. Unboxing the HHC14s was a pretty similar experience to the 12s. In the box, there's the top cymbal pad and the bottom plate, which acts as both a dummy bottom cymbal and the hi-hat controller. For some reason, mine had some odd brick-coloured dust around the plunger, but this wiped off fine with a cloth. There's also a bag of accessories, which includes a clutch that has a rotation stopper on the bottom, a plastic clamp with Velcro straps to keep the bottom plate in place, a short stereo jack cable to link the cymbal pad to the controller, a rubber washer, a couple of Allen keys, a spare set of straps and a spare grub screw for the rotation stopper on the clutch. It's nice to see a couple of spares in there, and the inclusion of the right Allen keys for the bolts on the clutch is also handy. Though if I wanted to be really picky, having drum key screws instead of Allen key screws would be slightly better. The clutch has received a significant upgrade since I reviewed the 12-inch hats. The clutch supplied with the previous model was actually too narrow to fit on my 8mm hi-hat rod. There was a spare rotation stopper with a large hole that you could attach to your own clutch, but this was a bit of a fiddly process, and if you didn't have a spare clutch, you might have had to purchase an appropriate one, which is never ideal. This new clutch is actually a pretty great design. It has a wide enough opening to fit stands with 8mm rods, but it also fully disassembles, which makes setup easier. Rather than removing the rotation stopper from the bottom, sliding the cymbal up, and then trying to squeeze the Allen key into the gap between the stopper and the cymbal, you can remove the entire top of the clutch, unscrew this nut and then put the cymbal on to meet the stopper. Then you add the felt and the nut back on top in the desired position for the amount of movement that you want and reattach the top of the clutch with the Allen bolts. This means that you'll always have the rotation stopper at the right height on the bottom of the clutch, and you can make any adjustments on top without affecting it. I remember that Lemon said they were going to supply a wider clutch after I reviewed the last model, and I hope that that means that they also supply the same clutch now with the 12-inch version because it's much better. The included rubber washer or gasket is also something that they added shortly after the 12-inch hi-hats went on sale. This 3mm piece of rubber actually expands the compatibility of these hi-hats in a roundabout way. If you have a module that supports the Roland VH13 hi-hats and allows you to use additional foot pressure to achieve an extra tight closed articulation, like the higher-end Roland modules, the Pearl Mimic Pro or the eDRUMin, then you won't really need this washer. However, if you have a module that doesn't support it, like the Roland TD-17, then adding this washer pushes the plunger down slightly further to fully close the hi-hat at the correct point for VH10 or VH11 style trigger presets. If you don't use the washer on those modules, then you might not be able to fully close the hi-hats without applying way more foot pressure than is natural. Obviously, it's not going to work wonders. There will be drum modules that don't support this hi-hat at all. I don't think it will work properly with Yamaha modules, as I believe that they use a different method for their hi-hat controllers. There are potentially other brands or modules that this won't work with. I can only test what I've got, but the general rule is that if your module supports Roland style hi-hat controllers, then in theory this should work with it either with or without the washer. So let's have a look at how it plays on the modules that I have, and I'll put on screen whether or not I used the washer. So it effectively triggers the same as the 12-inch version on these modules. The only notable exception is the Strike module, where I couldn't get the foot splash to work properly, but I could with the 12-inch model. It's been a while since I've dialed in a pad on that module, so there's a chance that I've overlooked something. I did notice in the captured MIDI data that I was getting a bow hit when using the pedal, so maybe this was interfering with the foot splashes, I'm not certain. I also didn't have an Alesis Strata Prime back when I reviewed the 12-inch model, and it's nice to see that the performance was pretty good on the Prime module. Now, of course, you won't get the bell zone with this hi-hat like you do on the Arc hi-hat, so there's not really much reason to swap it out, but it's nice to know that it's supported. I'm guessing this should also apply to the new Strata Core kit, as that appears to be based on the same software, but I can't confirm it without trying it. If it does work exactly the same, then some people might prefer the larger surface over that third zone, since that kit comes with a 12-inch hi-hat. One issue that I brought up with the 12-inch Lemon hi-hat was that the cymbal pad did have a noticeable hotspot, like most Lemon cymbals do. There is still a bit of a hotspot on this pad, as the piezo is just under the playing surface here, but the good news for the HHC14 is that it wasn't nearly as noticeable. The velocity doesn't seem to spike quite as dramatically on this pad as it did on the 12-inch version, and also because there's an extra inch of playing surface on this side, the hotspot is actually located closer to the bell, so I found I wasn't as likely to hit it either. In fact, I didn't really notice there was a hotspot until I went looking for it, which is great. It led to a much smoother playing experience. Now, one small downside in the current landscape of electronic cymbals is that these are only really playable on one half of the surface. Roland cymbals still work this way, and I don't have a huge problem with this approach. The stopper does its job, and I don't really think about it that much. But a lot of manufacturers are moving to 360-degree triggering these days, so it's worth noting that these don't have that capability. The controller works as well as any other plunger design that I've tried, and foot splashes are also easy enough to execute on the majority of modules. I did have to play with the settings a little bit from the stock presets to make sure I wasn't getting a hi-hat bow hit when I opened the pedal. This can be a relatively common problem with hi-hat pads mounted on stands, and it's a twofold issue. Part of it is because the pad is quite light and my hi-hat stand is quite fast and aggressive when I lift my foot up, and that vibrates enough to mistrigger the cymbal. So first off, I loosened my spring tension to compensate for this. And secondly, this cymbal is a little bit hotter on the output than some other brand pads, meaning that an aggressive vibration is more likely to trigger it. So as well as reducing the sensitivity a little bit, I brought up the threshold and took advantage of any hi-hat denoise settings on modules that have them. Between those small steps, I could dial out any unwanted triggering pretty easily on the majority of modules. So these Lemon hi-hats compare favourably to other two-piece hi-hats that I've used. It might seem ridiculous to pit them against the Roland VH14D hi-hats, considering that they're a flagship product made by a long-standing brand, and the fact that they're USB-powered digital hi-hats, but there's actually less in it than you might think. The Lemon hi-hat pad itself is also more inflexible than a Roland pad, and that's one of my larger complaints about Lemon cymbals in general. Even when I loosen the Lemon pad on the clutch, it doesn't feel quite as satisfying to lay into, and it feels chunkier under the stick. The rubber on this cymbal is simultaneously thinner and a bit softer feeling, which means that the stick attack isn't quite as satisfying either. But here's the thing, you might notice I'm saying a bit, a little. not quite as, because that's kind of it really. The Lemon hi-hats really do hold their own. They're just a bit different to and not as premium feeling as something that's 5 to 6 times the price, obviously. As far as other 14-inch electronic hi-hats go, I've used the DWE hi-hats for quite a long time. The Lemon hi-hats are very different to those, and not compatible with the DWE without adding in other hardware, so that comparison's not really worth making there. I've only briefly tried the new Gaver NIO hi-hat and the F-Note 14-inch hi-hat, but I'm quite confident in saying that again, there's not really much in it. You could also buy at least 2 sets of these before you hit the price of any of the others. And that is one thing to consider. There is a chance that you could end up buying more than one set of these. Back when I reviewed the last hi-hats, I'd previously broken one of my 15-inch Lemon ride cymbals. Since then, my 18-inch ride has actually cracked on the edge too. I was using it quite regularly as a 2-zone crash cymbal, so in the long term there is a chance that Lemon cymbals might be more prone to breaking than other brands. I have mentioned before on the channel though that I've broken a Roland cymbal before, so it could just be that I'm a heavy-handed walloper. But it is something to keep in mind when you're buying cheaper components. If you're happy taking that risk or just replacing these if they fail, then I probably wouldn't let that put you off. As I've said many times, we're hitting plastic with wooden sticks, so there's always a chance of this happening. So in terms of who these are for or who they aren't for, owners of Roland V71, TD-50X or 27 modules might prefer the digital hi-hats. They'll give you the best possible experience if you're happy to pay the price for them, and most of Roland's kit configurations for those modules come with those hi-hats now anyway. That said, some of the early ones didn't, or you might have bought just the module. In those cases, this could be a nice, cheaper upgrade than getting the digital hats. If you have another kit that comes with 14-inch hi-hats like some Gaver, ATV, F-Note and Alesis kits, there's probably no reason to buy these instead of the hi-hats that came with your kit. But on the other hand, if you've got a Mimic Pro, a 2-box module, an eDRUMin or something like a TD-17 kit, or an older, cheaper or DIY electronic kit and module combination, the Lemon LE-HHC14 hi-hats could make a great upgrade to your kit. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Don't forget to check out my store over at the eDrumworkshop.com if you want new kits for your electronic drum module, and above all, enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers!